The ABCs of horror.
Welcome to the HellBound Horror Show. If you don't know this man, then you may not be a horror fan. This, my friend, is Tom Savini, and he is one of the greatest special effects artists that has ever been in horror. His work speaks for itself. He's worked on Friday the 13th Part 1 and 4, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, and Night of the Living Dead remake. He's often listed as the godfather of gore. He was a Vietnam War photographer, so he had to take some pictures of some really gruesome stuff. And when he creates his horror FX, he really has a fine attention to detail and realism. With a resume as impressive as his, it's just a shame that possibly one of his greatest works in film goes largely unnoticed. Tonight we are using the Necronomicon to help us uncover this hidden gem. (1981's) The Prowler. The slasher genre is one of my favorite subgenres of horror films. I just love the systematic plots, the overdone cliches, the creative kills, and the interesting designs for the killers. I know exactly what I'm getting into when I sit down to watch a slasher film. It's my comfort food, my guilty pleasure. Being a fan of slasher films, the year 1981 comes up a lot. It was the golden age for the genre, and possibly the peak of the craze. There were some huge names in the slasher genre that came out in 1981. Friday the 13th Part 2, Halloween Part 2, My Bloody Valentine, Happy Birthday to Me, Bloody Birthday, The Burning, Funhouse, Final Exam, and Dark Night of the Scarecrow all came out in 1981, and I'm not even scratching the surface. It's clear that the market was oversaturated, and eventually that bubble would burst, and only the big name franchises would really thrive. The movie that I want to look at tonight is a byproduct of that 1981 slasher boom. It often gets lost in the mess, however, it's gotten a resurgence lately and has become a cult classic. Tonight, we're taking a look at The Prowler. The Prowler begins in 1945 in a small New Jersey town after the vets returned home from war. The local college is having a graduation dance when two young lovebirds leave the party to get their smooching on. Little do they know that there is a prowler sneaking about. Come on! That guy should have known not to be messing around with a girl inside of a horror movie. You could really say that he forked up. Then we cut to present day 1980. It's been over 30 years since that terrible night, and the local college decides to hold a graduation dance again. It's going to be the first dance since the murders, and... Wait a second. Isn't this the same plot as My Bloody Valentine? Both movies have lasting traditions, and then a terrible accident happens. That said tradition is then canceled for many years, and when the town finally decides to hold that tradition again, a killer comes back. These movies were released only 9 months apart, so I don't think that The Prowler could have just copied My Bloody Valentine, but I don't know. Maybe. Anyways, we follow Pam and her boyfriend Mark, who just so happens to be the only cop on duty for the night of the dance. Remember, this dance was canceled for many years because, someone killed people on that night. Great idea, police force. Anyway, we see Pam and her friends getting ready for the dance, but we also see the killer getting ready as well. I actually really like this setup. It's a special occasion for all parties, and all of them have to look their best. The killer is decked out in military gear, and his face is hidden from view.
I'm here for our date, Rose.
Speaking of the killer, this guy is brutal. He's forceful, he's powerful. He honestly reminds me a lot of Kane Hodder as Jason Voorhees, well before Kane Hodder was ever Jason Voorhees. He's also got a wide array of weapons at his disposal, and he knows how to use them. He has his long knife, he has his gun, and he has his pitchfork? I don't really see that going well with, army motif, but to each his own. He's also a master of stealth, so this guy's just awesome. The killer goes on an amazing killing spree, but that's pretty much it for the synopsis. It's not much deeper than that, outside of the conclusion, of course, but not about to spoil that. Some slasher films are just better than others, and unfortunately, The Prowler isn't great. The acting is fine, but there's no real connection between the characters, which just makes the story feel dry. The plot is paper thin, and the writing isn't great. The directing is just safe. This feels like a Friday the 13th film in a lot of regards. You have your mass killer, you have your teenagers getting killed and your young adults getting killed, you have your drug use, you have your nudity, but you also have your awesome kills. More on that later. When I said that The Prowler felt like a Friday the 13th film, the people over at Friday the 13th felt the same way, so they hired the director Joseph Zito to direct their next Friday the 13th installment, Part 4, the final chapter. This just drives home the familiarity with Friday the 13th. Also, Tom Savini, who did the gore effects in The Prowler, as well as the original Friday the 13th, was brought on by Joseph Zito to do the gore effects in Friday the 13th, Part 4. For its time, The Prowler was a pretty decent slasher film, and arguably better than the first two installments of Friday the 13th series. I know a lot of people love Friday Part 1, but compare it to The Prowler, and I think The Prowler wins every time. More fleshed out characters, better tension, more atmosphere, better gore, better twist ending, and a better killer. I know what you're saying. The Prowler came out after Friday the 13th Part 1 did, so The Prowler could have just copied the ideas and it had time to make things better. And sure, I'll agree with you there. However, Friday the 13th copied Halloween, it copied Black Christmas, and somehow was worse than both of those films. I understand that Friday the 13th Part 1 is beloved by many, but the only thing going for it is its gore effects, and they pale in comparison to the work that Tom Savini did in The Prowler. Some people would say that Friday the 13th has a more shocking twist ending. Yeah, people don't expect Pam Voorhees to be the killer because she isn't introduced until the end of the film. Of course no one could guess that she did it because no one knew she existed. Also, there is no way that she did all of those killings. Yeah, she could have killed a few of those counselors, but there is no way that she was moving those corpses around. Her aging body was incapable of most of those kills. My refrigerator is more likely to go on a killing spree than Mrs. Voorhees. I digress. Let's talk about the gore effects a little bit. This is Tom Savini's best work in a slasher film, and he's even said so himself. These kills are gruesome, realistic, and the shot tends to drag on the image. Normally you want to cut quickly away from the gore effect so the audience doesn't have time to find the flaws, but there aren't any flaws in these kills. It unsettles even me, which is saying a lot. All in all, The Prowler isn't a great film. The kills are the highlight of the film, and it actually makes the film worth watching just for those kills. And one more thing before I go. The Prowler is better than Friday the 13th Part 1. Yeah, go ahead, fight me on that one.